सो फर्स्ट टॉपिक जो आज का हमारा होगा दैट इज CBDC, that is RBI has launched just yesterday a pilot project especially on the retail segment of its CBDC, central bank digital currency you can say, or you can in one word you can say digital rupee. ठीक है. So first topic जो आज हमारा होगा आज का that would be CBDC, central bank digital currency, or you can simply say digital rupee, or even you can say e-rupee. ठीक है. You can say e-rupee. ठीक है. So till now we have been dealing with the cash in a physical form like notes or coins, currency notes or coins. So in the same manner the background for this is, I hope you might be aware of a term called cryptocurrency. कोई idea है? Yes. I am firstly giving you the brief for the historical background about how we reached to this and how the number of countries world over are now launching their digital currencies, fine, equivalent of their physical form of respective domestic currency. But how we came here, how we reached here, and how we started thinking that we need to launch what? Digital rupee or e-rupee, that is electronic rupee. ठीक है. So the background is, the story starts with the cryptocurrency. Like आप लोगों ने नेम सुने होंगे कुछ, suppose Bitcoin, Ethereum, these are basically cryptocurrencies. सुना ये? Yes, मोनिका. क्या होते हैं क्रिप्टो करेंसीज? यस. नहीं, ट्रांजैक्शन तो होंगे. व्हाट एग्जैक्टली इज अ क्रिप्टो करेंसी? आई मीन हाउ वुड यू बी एबल टू डिफाइन इट? यस. और क्या मैकेनिज्म है इनका, हाउ दे वर्क, एनी आइडिया? यस, नो आइडिया. चलो, सो हम नो प्रॉब्लम, हम देखते हैं. रिमेंबर व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट क्रिप्टो करेंसी, दिस बिटकॉइन, दिस एथेरियम, दिस ऑल आर बेसिकली the cryptocurrency, but behind the cryptocurrency there is a technology called blockchain technology, which is behind the operation of these cryptocurrencies. Fine. Blockchain technology क्या है basically? इसमें क्या है, as the name suggests, block and chain. ठीक है. So this is basically a digital, you can say, decentralized ledger. Ledger you understand, जो बही खाता हम बनाते हैं, the account basically. Fine. We take into account the debit and credit sides and all. ठीक है, पैसे कितने आए कितने गए. So digital ledger you can say, or a decentralized ledger. How it is decentralized? Basically it works on this technology blockchain. ठीक है. इसमें different sets of people, there are persons connected through their systems, you can say like this, different sets of blocks, and there is a chain like going like this. Fine. All are connected to one another like this. Fine. So that's why this technology itself is what? Decentralized. Means, see here there is no central authority who is controlling this whole mechanism of flow of, you can say, the currency in the economy or in a country. Fine. So anywhere we cannot find out here, or there is no per se the central authority regulating this whole transaction. Fine. So this is one negative point of this whole thing. This is though the pros, I mean the positive point is it is decentralized, perfectly fine, but this is not backed by, or you can say this is not a legal tender. Legality nahi hai. Why so? Because there is no central authority like RBI here to manage these whole operations. Fine. So this is the biggest lacuna of cryptocurrencies. Fine. बट डिसेंट्रलाइज इसलिए है क्योंकि यहाँ पे एक बंदा है, दूसरा है, तीसरा है, चौथा है, फिफ्थ एंड सिक्स्थ, एंड इट्स अ रोबस्ट लाइक दिस कि अगर एक इसमें होता क्या है बेसिकली कि अगर एक बंदे ने सपोज आपने कोई ट्रांजैक्शन की, सो वो ट्रांजैक्शन जो है दैट वुड बी ऑथराइज्ड और दैट वुड बी रजिस्टर्ड by all the 6 persons and that would get registered on their respective systems. I mean all the 6 systems. Fine. So this is full proof कि उसमें कुछ मैनिपुलेशन की चांसेस नहीं है, बिकॉज अगर आप एक जगह से करोगे तो सबके सिस्टम में वो साइमल्टेनियसली रिफ्लेक्ट होना स्टार्ट हो जाएगा. फाइन. सो बिकॉज ऑफ दैट दिस सिस्टम सीम्स टू बी फुल प्रूफ. फाइन. सो फ्रॉम हियर ऑन वी वुड बी कैरिंग फॉरवर्ड द प्रोज, आई मीन द पॉजिटिव जो भी इसके हैं पॉजिटिव्स पॉइंट ऑफ दिस ब्लॉकचेन टेक्नोलॉजी वी वुड बी कैरिंग फॉरवर्ड एंड वी वुड बी imbibing or including or basing our whole digital currency circulation or digital e-rupee, electronic rupee on this, though we'll be using this indeed technology called blockchain, but in a regulated manner. There would be a central authority like the any central bank of any country. Fine. Central bank is going to what? Regulate, and these different persons in place would be rather banks. This would be B1, B2, we call it intermediaries. Fine. These would be different types of, I mean different banks, like we have SBI, PNB and all. So they all would function but in this way. Fine. So banks here would take the place of whom? The individual persons who were not, you can say, regulated by any central authority, or the whole mechanism or the operation of this transaction was not legal until now. But once a central authority comes into the picture, this would be treated as a legal tender, where an authority would promise, like bank notes पे भी आप देखते हो कि I promise the bearer to pay this much amount. So in the same manner, this digital currency is going to be the equivalent of your physical currency or the coins. Fine. यहाँ तक clear है? Okay. So this was the background that how the things started. Since cryptocurrency, though is kind of a market, you can say a bubble, or this was mostly market based, but the biggest negative, I mean this, you can say the biggest negative point or the biggest lacuna of this whole mechanism is there is no central authority to regulate this whole process, and that's why it is not accepted. It has not been accepted by many of the, I mean the majority of the countries, you can say, because of its nature itself, which is not legal in operations. So because of this absence of any legal authority, what the countries came forward with, that we need to have in place of digital, I mean the cryptocurrencies, rather we can have using this blockchain technology, we can come up with our own domestic currencies in the form of digital currencies. So this is how the the origin of this, or the birth of CBDC came into being, or I said e-rupee. Fine. So up till this I think it's clear. Now come back to the CBDC, central bank digital currency. So as the name suggests, central bank, so this would be basically regulated by a central authority or central bank of a country, any country. In our country it would be regulated by RBI. ठीक है. So RBI ने before launching, making it full-fledged operational for each and everyone, it is using this whole mechanism or the set of its CBDC, this technology on pilot basis or the pilot projects for the and under two heads. First is for retail purposes and second is for wholesale purposes. Retail. Just yesterday, I mean this RBI launched this pilot project and we call it like e-rupee retail, R, capital R, retail. ठीक है. On the similar lines we have this wholesale pilot project. Wholesale basically retail में क्या फ़र्क है? Wholesale में like retail at the retailers level, like individual we, like IAS level, enterprise level, government level, and wholesale is basically a security market based, like यहाँ पे government securities जिसको हम GSEC बोलते हैं, या trading secondary markets, you understand, basically the security related trading purposes. ठीक है. So up till now, I mean until now only RBI has tested or run its pilot project on these two separate under two separate categories. ठीक है. So we can say this was launched yesterday, but this has been launched months before, and in fact in you can say this was launched on basically 1st November. ठीक है, months before, and then the second launched from the 1st of December. ठीक है, this retail current one. So this is currently the pilot projects are going on, and once this would be this tested as a foolproof system, it would be possible for all of us to transact digitally. Fine. So this is the concept of CBDC, or you can say electronic rupee or digital currency. Clear है यहाँ तक? So give the heading, what is e-rupee? What is e-rupee, electronic rupee? Give the heading, what is e-rupee? E-rupee क्या है? So as the name suggests, e-rupee is basically electronic rupee, but how come RBI defines it? So write down, RBI defines CBDC, central bank digital currency, CBDC, as a digital form of currency notes issued by a central bank in accordance with its monetary policy, in accordance with country's monetary policy, in accordance with country's monetary policy. ठीक है. Under this e-rupee ही next point is, this was the first point, definition basically. Second is legal tender. Legal tender, as I said, that a central authority promises, this become claim, this becomes the liability of the central bank. किसी भी नोट पे जब आप देखते हो वहाँ पे लिखा होता है I promise to pay the bearer, and उसी पे नीचे साइन होता है RBI गवर्नर का. So this is liability on the banks to this is being shown, I mean whatever currency circulation is there in the market, it is being shown on the liability side of the balance sheet of any bank. Why? Because this is a claim of, you can say, the general people or enterprises or the businessman, anybody's. ठीक है. So this is like claim where the other party or the central bank promises you to pay this much of amount. ठीक है. So जो वो 500 लिखा हुआ, that is just a paper, and उस पे जब स्टैम्प लग जाता है RBI गवर्नर का and all that, गांधी जी and all, so it becomes that paper currency, simple paper currency becomes the 500 rupee notes, and it is generally acceptable by everybody because there is a central authority claiming to pay you and promising to pay you the equivalent sum of, I mean 500 लिखा है तो उसकी जो value है that is 500 only. ठीक है. So we have a general trust that there is a legal party or a legal this central authority which won't default on its promises. ठीक है. So next point is legal tender. Legal tender under this CBDC will be considered as legal tender. Considered as legal tender होता क्या basically? So it would be legally acceptable as a medium of exchange or medium of payment, you can say, medium of payment, comma store of value, because अगर आपके वो वॉलेट में अगर 500 डिजिटल फॉर्मेट में है तो दैट इज हैविंग सम वैल्यू, दैट इज अगर 500 आपके उसमें टोकन करेंसी है और डिजिटल करेंसी है, दैट इज वर्थ द 500 रुपीज. ठीक है. सो स्टोर ऑफ वैल्यू as a legal tender by all three parties. तो इन कौन कौन से हैं? नंबर 1 is your citizens, we. The second is government or government bodies or this you can say institutions, and last is enterprises, that is business community. ठीक है. यहाँ पे एक पॉइंट है, रिमेंबर दैट दिस ई रूपी इज नॉट गोइंग टू फेच एनी इंटरेस्ट ऑन डिपॉजिट्स. लाइक जब आप ई रूपी को जैसे हम एयरटेल पोस्ट पेमेंट बैंक आप यूज दिस एयरटेल पेमेंट बैंक यूज करते हो या पेटीएम यूज करते हो, सो दीज आर द वॉलेट्स वेयर यू ट्रांसफर सर्टेन अमाउंट्स ऑफ दिस rupee from your account to these wallets and then you use for transaction purposes, right? In the same fashion or same manner, this e-rupee is going to act like a wallet, fine, but it is not going to fetch any interest, fine. Why? Because the RBI has one this you can say fear, or this is even a valid point from the RBI side, and RBI argues that people might withdraw their physical currencies from the banks and start depositing here if you provide them any this interest on the money they keep in their wallets. ठीक है. So that's the reason that RBI is not in favor of providing any kind of interest on the deposits or the amount of digital currencies that you have in your wallets, fine, mobile wallets. क्लियर. सो इसमें कोई इंटरेस्ट नहीं मिलने वाला, इस चीज़ का ध्यान रखना. अदरवाइज यू withdraw your you will start withdrawing your, not you but everybody will start withdrawing their physical cash, because sometimes we see that banks डूब जाते हैं, दिवालिया हो जाते हैं. सो पीपल रन लाइक PMC, पंजाब एंड महाराष्ट्र कोऑपरेटिव बैंक जो हमें देखने को मिला, देन दे इम्पोज अ लिमिट beyond which you cannot withdraw, but digital format में है, so people can at least send and all transact. So it would be difficult. I mean banks की utility भी फिर धीरे धीरे कम हो जाएगी. So we are not going to replace the banks with this wallet, rather we are going to make them more what, tech savvy or innovation savvy, you can say, or innovative rather, fine, and they would be acting as an intermediary in this whole process. ठीक है. जो हार्ड करेंसी जो फिजिकल फॉर्म में करेंसीज हैं, फाइन, सो दोज करेंसीज वुड बी लाइंग विद द बैंक्स इटसेल्फ ओनली. ठीक है. differences with cryptocurrency. Now what is the difference between CBDC and cryptocurrency? This is very important. CBDC and crypto में क्या difference है? crypto में क्या difference है दोनों में? crypto and CBDC. Fine. So remember, the first most important point is that CBDC is a legal tender because it is being backed by some legal authority or the central authority. Legal tender. Here this is not the case, crypto, because this is virtual currency operated privately by individuals, which is not backed by any central authority. So that's why they cannot be termed as a legal tender. Fine. डूब गए तो डूब गए, there is no one accountable for the same. ठीक है. First thing. Second is this is similarity that both uses a technology called blockchain. ठीक है, ठीक है. बिगेस्ट डिफरेंस जो है, दिस इज द नंबर 1 पॉइंट. ठीक है, you can say this is not that decentralized, you can say rather centralized, but as I showed you through these blocks, the number of persons connected through the block, so this is quite decentralized. ठीक है. Both are again point of similarity, virtual currencies only. Even this is digital, that is even digital. Fine. So biggest point of जो आपने माइंड में रखना है, that is legal tender का जो इशू है, लीगैलिटी की जो कॉन्सेप्ट है, जो लीगैलिटी की कंट्रोल बाय एनी सेंट्रल अथॉरिटी. सो जो लीगल पॉइंट एंगल है हमारा, दैट बिकम्स वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, बिकॉज देन only the people or the citizens would be able to repose their faith or trust in the circulation of this digital currency. इसमें तो काफ़ी लोग इन्वेस्ट कर रहे हैं, बट दिस इज जस्ट फॉर प्रॉफिट मोटिव. बट एट प्रेजेंट द क्रिप्टो करेंसीज की जो हाल चल रहे हैं, आई होप यू आर अवेयर ऑफ माइट बी अवेयर ऑफ दिस द होल क्रिप्टो बबल दैट इज गोइंग ऑन. ठीक है, सो दैट इज द प्रॉब्लम कि यहाँ पे डूब गए तो डूब गए. इट्स टोटली रिस्की गेम. हियर यू हैव एन इंस्टीट्यूशन विच इज प्रॉमिसिंग यू टू पे वट एवर अमाउंट यू डिपॉजिट देयर. ठीक है, और वट एवर अमाउंट यू कीप इन योर वॉलेट्स. So that is the biggest trust deficit here we see. Here we don't have such kind of trust related problems. ठीक है, so these are major, or you can say, points of similarities and dissimilarities or the differences. Fine. Now one important fact is, next point under this is global scenario. So how the globally the countries are, global scenario क्या है related to your CBDC or digital currency, you can say. So an important fact here is that around 105 countries are somewhere exploring this CBDC, the concept of central bank digital currencies. Out of these, 10 countries have already launched this, and out of them the first to launch this was rather Bahamas. Bahamas is a country which launched this Bahamian sand dollar. It's a domestic currency name, sand dollar basically. ठीक है, so Bahamian sand dollar that was launched in 2020. So this has been the first CBDC across the world. ठीक है, the latest is Jamaica's. The latest one, I mean, India has not yet officially launched, rather we are in the pilot mode only, we are just testing. So once it would be launched, even we will come into this, the 10 categories. ठीक है, the countries which have already launched. ठीक है, so the last one which has, I said 10, so this was the first one, and this is the 10th one, which is recently launched, is official CBDC, or you can say the digital currency, that is Jamaica's Jamdex जो करेंसी उसकी है. Just remember the name of the currency, that is Jamaica. And India अगर इसके बाद लॉन्च कर देती है तो would be the 11th, और in between हमारे से पहले कोई और कर दे तो probably will be 12th or 13th. ठीक है, so we need to keep tap on this. ठीक है, चलो. I have already told you about the types of rupees. So RBI is basically running the pilot projects under 2 different types, or the modes, you can say, the retail and the wholesale. I have already told you about the retail and wholesale. So retail, when we say, it is used by private sectors, the persons, individually, as well as you can say the business people or the enterprises. As far as wholesale is concerned, this is restricted for used by this, you can say, the financial institutions, especially dealing in the securities, you can say, or the secondary markets or the security markets. ठीक है, so both way we need to test this project. ठीक है, now the thing is, the biggest the whole this thing that we need to understand it is how this mechanism, or you can say the e-rupee is going to work. How e-rupee works basically. What is the mechanism? Okay. So at top we have the RBI here, which is controlling this whole mechanism of your CBDC, central bank digital currency, or you can say the digital rupee or electronic rupee, e-rupee. Fine. इसके बाद remember this would be, अब digital है तो कैसे, it would be like a token, it will be provided a token which would be bearing, like जैसे currency notes हमारे होते हैं उस पर लिखा होता है this is worth 500, so 500 का अगर नोट है तो that is 500. In the same manner you will be having a token here, digital tokens basically carrying the equivalent amount. जैसे 500 का टोकन हो सकता है, fine, equivalent to 500. So you will be having digital tokens that it represent a legal tender. It in itself it would be a legal tender. Fine. Why legal tender? Because this is being backed by your central authority or the central bank. Fine. So, and this token would be issued on the similar lines in the form of, it might be either currency notes or even coins. Okay. So it's not like that key. So if you see the design of this this e-rupee is similar to the physical circulation of money in the economy. We would be having currency, we would be having coins as well, like 20 rupee coins. So you would be getting a token worth 20 rupees which you can freely transact with anybody. If you want to transfer, like Google Pay के through हम transfer करते हैं friends को, so we can transfer that worth of this token to your friend. He or she can further, your friend can further transfer it to the whomever he wants to pay. Fine. So things would be like this only, but whole scenario would be, it's you can imagine this thing or correlate this thing with the Google Pay or Phone Pay or whatever wallet payments you do on the regular basis. So the experience is going to be like that only, but here it would be a legal tender, basically distinguishing it from other wallet payments or digital transactions, because we here have a central authority, that is a central bank, RBI. ठीक है. ट्रांजैक्शंस जो है लाइक बोथ वे हो सकती है. बोथ वे कैसे होगी? दिस टोकन कुड बी ट्रांजैक्टेड इन टू वेज. It could be P2P, that is person to person, as I said, you can send to your friend and receive from your friend. So person to person, or it could be person to merchant. Like if you are purchasing something from any showroom, so you can pay them directly, you can pay merchants directly or transfer directly. Like presently we transfer amounts with the help of what? Google Pay or Phone Pay or any other wallet like Paytm. ठीक है. So things would be like this. ठीक है. So both way, and merchants को पे करने के लिए we would be having another facility, जैसे आजकल होता है, आप देखते हो, you just need to scan their QR codes and directly make the transaction. So in the same fashion, even this is going to, digital rupee is going to work on the similar lines. ठीक है. ठीक. बट कीप इन माइंड, जैसे मैंने पहले ही बताया था कि नो बैंक्स गोइंग टू पे यू एनी इंटरेस्ट रेट्स ऑन दिस वॉलेट डिपॉजिट्स. आई मीन वट एवर अमाउंट यू वुड बी कीपिंग इन योर वॉलेट्स, यू वॉन्ट बी गेटिंग एनी इंटरेस्ट रेट्स ऑन देम. ठीक है. बट यू हैव द ऑप्शन टू convert these wallet amounts or the whatever deposit amounts you are having in your wallets to the physical form, or like you can also have like RD account or fixed deposit account. You can open the same with the banks, like deposits with the banks. But remember, another point here is you need not to, if you are just if you are using this only for transaction purposes and only you are using the digital rupee, then you need not to open account with that bank for this purpose only. ठीक है. So here another technical point is we need not to open any account with the banks for making transaction digitally in the form of CBDC or electronic rupee. ठीक है. सो इसके लिए हमें अकाउंट की ज़रूरत नहीं है, बट येस अगर सपोज लैक्स ऑफ रुपीज़ लाइंग इन योर वॉलेट, सो यू कैन ट्रांसफर सर्टन अमाउंट्स इन थाउजेंड्स, और यू कैन ओपन योर फिक्स्ड डिपॉजिट अकाउंट्स और आरडी अकाउंट इन फिजिकल फॉर्म, in whatever bank you are having the accounts. उस पर्पज़ के लिए चाहिए, बट वी नीड नॉट टू हैव accounts per se specifically for your digital transaction. ठीक है. Now what are the issues? So issues is simple, you can correlate. I mean, we are facing one of the biggest cyber attacks recently in India. So yes, any clue you have that I am referring to, Monica? Recent cyber attacks we have experienced one of the premier institutes of India. So cyber security threat is always going to be one this risk related to these digital transactions. ठीक है. आइडिया नहीं है आपको? यस क्या? आई एम आस्किंग कि साइबर, आई मीन द पॉइंट इज लाइक इश्यूज क्या रिलेटेड हैं इस होल CBDC के साथ और ई रूपी के साथ, क्या इश्यूज हो सकते हैं, क्या डाउन साइड्स क्या हैं, आई मीन द नेगेटिव पॉइंट्स क्या हैं. सो वन साइड आई सेड इज साइबर सिक्योरिटी रिस्क और साइबर थ्रेट्स. So recently last week what happened, if you are aware of this news that AIMS, All India Institute of Medical Sciences Delhi, came under the grip of the cyber these attacks, and many important data had been leaked, or you can say or under this came under this attack, and there were many servers of the AIMS which were down for weeks, even this week, and this AIMS is in the very just verifying and then shifted to the manual processing of the data. So there were data having data of crores of people, especially the important persons holding the topmost constitutional position in India, because you can see जो भी top VVIPs हैं, they always rush to the they get their treatment from AIMS Delhi. ठीक है. So this is one of the important downsides of this whole digital framework or mechanism, is that we always have this threat of cyber attacks. ठीक है. So cyber security is one issue. Then another issue we can have is privacy issue. I mean कुछ data हमारे important leaks हो जाते हैं due to cyber threat, these attacks. So again this would I mean 2 years back you might be aware कि काफ़ी इंडियंस के लैक्स ऑफ इंडियंस के जो डेटा डेबिट कार्ड की जो डिटेल्स थी वो ब्रीच हो गई थी, वो लीक्ड हो गई थी, लीक. ठीक है. सो उसमें भी आपके जो पर्सनल इंफॉर्मेशंस हैं दोज हैव बीन लीक्ड. सो अगेन इट इज़ वन ऑफ द थ्रेट्स और द रिस्क. ठीक है. सो दीज आर बेसिकली द इश्यूज जो जनरल किसी भी डिजिटल आई मीन कुछ भी करेंसी यू कैन से लाइक हेयर और डिजिटल जो सेटअप है किसी भी फील्ड में हो सकता है. सो ऑलवेज वी हैव साइबर सिक्योरिटी थ्रेट्स और द इश्यूज इन्वॉल्व विद दैट पर्टिकुलर प्रोजेक्ट. द मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट अगेन डाउन साइड्स और द नेगेटिव पॉइंट इज और द इश्यूज यू कैन से इज डिजिटल डिवाइड, जो हमें कोरोना के टाइम पे भी देखने को मिला. डिजिटल डिवाइड और यू कैन से द फाइनेंशियल इलिटरेसी. डिजिटल डिवाइड एंड फाइनेंशियल इलिटरेसी. अभी भी हमारी कंट्री में इतनी अवेयरनेस नहीं है. आई एम नॉट टॉकिंग अबाउट द सिटीज और द अर्बन दिस इंडिया, बट रादर रूरल एरियाज में अगर आप जाओगे. सो द लेटेस्ट ऑफिशियल और द लीगल डेटा वी हैव इज ऑफ NFHS, National Family Health Survey 5, which states that even today This data hopefully was the year of 2020-21 or 2019-20, so released in 2021. So this data suggests NFHS 5, I mean this was a 5th round of National Family Health Survey, this was a 5th survey basically in the line. So it states that only 48.7%, this NFHS says that only 48.7% of rural males, so males अगर इतने हैं तो females का almost और भी कम होगा. Yes, so the percentage is just 24.6%. 24.6% of rural females access, have access to internets. ठीक है, ever, or this much percentage of males and females have ever used internets. ठीक है, so you can see is less than 50%. So any architecture, money की जो transaction है, that is, everywhere, be it your rural or urban this areas. So रूरल में भी हमें डिजिटल लिटरेसी बढ़ाने की ज़रूरत है और फाइनेंशियल लिटरेसी कैसे बढ़ाने की ज़रूरत है और अवेयरनेस स्प्रेड करने की ज़रूरत है. देन द सेम टाइम डिजिटल डिवाइड जो है उसको, उस डिवाइड को हमें कम करना पड़ेगा. देन ओनली वुड बी एबल टू बेटर implement this the framework of e-rupee or the electronic rupee. ठीक है, so this is one fact, fine, showing this or in consonance with this or validating the point of your digital divide. Fine, हमें कोरोना पे ड्यूरिंग पैंडेमिक भी देखने को मिला डिजिटल डिवाइड. ठीक है, गांव के बच्चे नहीं पढ़ पाए या ऑनलाइन क्लासेस नहीं लगा पाए. द होल इशू वॉज, आई मीन नेटवर्क इशूज़ हैं और उनके पास स्मार्टफोन्स नहीं है और दे आर they don't have this internet connections. ठीक है, so this is again one of the important points related to the success. If you want to make any digital architecture successful, then we need to have keeping in mind the rural India as well. ठीक है, I mean the more focus should be on the rural sites. ठीक है, so this is one important point or the negative point or the issues that is related to the success of this e-rupee. ठीक है, fine. Clear है मोनिका? चलो, so this is all about this topic is concerned. The second topic is from economics again, and this is one of the important ones, GDP versus GV, that is gross domestic product versus gross value added. Remember, this is important because this particular concepts have been was asked just in last year's mains paper GS3, that is before concept before tools for measuring the national income before 2015 and after 2015. So GVA was introduced in 2015. So we were we had been asked to write the answer for GVA versus GDP. The latest one 2021 mains GS3 question. ठीक है, so this becomes important not just from this point of view, but rather if when you go through or read just अभी quarter 2 जो है financial year 2023 का, the context is this only, that the quarter 2 results of financial year 2023 had been released by MOSPI, or you can particularly say the NSO, released by NSO, National Statistics Organization, under MOSPI, Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. So जब हम न्यूज़पेपर पढ़ते हैं, whenever you read newspaper related to economy like GDP, GVA और जैसे quarter 2 का result आया, so how whether you are able to correlate or understand the things in right perspective or not, that becomes very, very important. That would come only if we are clear about our concepts. Unless and until we don't have this background of or having the conceptual clarity about the terminologies of economics, so we won't be able to understand this whole data, or you can say especially the terms, or we won't be able to clearly understand the bigger picture of our economy. ठीक है, so उसके लिए सो कॉन्टेक्स्ट क्या है कि बेसिकली सेकेंड क्वार्टर बेसिकली कंप्राइज ऑफ जून, जुलाई एंड व्हाट अगस्त, जून टू सितंबर बेसिकली, जुलाई अगस्त सितंबर. सो आपके सितंबर के अभी डेटा रिलीज हुई है सेकेंड क्वार्टर ऑफ योर फाइनेंशियल ईयर 2023 और 2022-23. ठीक है. सो अभी जो जीडीपी है, जीडीपी जो फिगर है अकॉर्डिंग टू दिस क्वार्टर 3 दैट इज 6.3%. ठीक है. एंड जो जीवीए है दैट इज 5.6%. नाउ द बिगेस्ट क्वेश्चन हियर जो आना भी चाहिए कि व्हाई दिस डिफरेंस. सो ये कीप इन माइंड, वी विल बी डिस्कसिंग दिस only in this topic as we move on or proceed further. So keep in mind we will be addressing this difference, why we see this kind of difference. Here GDP is 6.3%, but GVA is showing that the growth of quarter 2 is just 5.6%. Why so? So keep in mind we will be addressing this question as we proceed. ठीक है, as we discuss further this topic. Another important point, there is a word called Y on Y, that is year on year basis. Year on year basis. So whenever we see this figure of GDP, we always, take this with respect to year on year basis. Now what does it mean? Monica, any idea? We say that quarter 2 GDP has been 6.3 on year basis. What does it mean? What do you understand by this year on year basis? Yes? Monica, any idea? No? So remember, whenever we want to compare something, we always need a base here, a base to compare with. So for that purpose, when we are saying that quarter 2 GDP जो है of financial year 2023 is 6.3%. I am taking the GDP figure here, not GVA. So जो GDP figure है that is 6.3 of quarter 2 of financial year 2023. So when we this GDP figure or this rate of growth in the form of GDP, ठीक है, is with respect to the base year. So we are comparing this figure with the quarter 2. Remember, comparison is based on the same parameters. ठीक है. So we are comparing this figure with the quarter 2 of financial year 2022. So financial year 2022 का मतलब that we are comparing the years 2021-2022. Fine. So with respect to the same quarters of previous year, that is year on year basis, that is from last year to this year, and now this year quarters GDP growth would form the base for comparing the 24th financial year quarter 2 results with the quarter 2 of 2023. Fine. So this is how we compare the figures or the growth rates. ठीक है. सो इसके कंपैरिजन में क्वार्टर 2 फाइनेंशियल ईयर 2022 के कंपैरिजन में जो ग्रोथ है दैट इज 6.3% मोर. फाइन. इन 2023 फाइनेंशियल ईयर 2023. क्लियर है? This is very important to be clear with, then only you would be able to relate the things whenever you go through the newspapers or any GDP figure. ठीक है. Though it seems that this figure is बहुत कम है, but remember one important things, the worldwide comparing China, which used to be the one of the it has decades of very good GDP growth rates, but struggling today. And in the same quarter 2 of 2023, the China's growth GDP figure has been 3.9%. ठीक है. So we are far ahead than China, and that's why we are one of the fastest growing economy of the world today. ठीक है. Because major जो economies हैं either developed or developing country, they are struggling with their GDP growth, but we are far ahead. 6.3, almost you can say twice, not twice, but more than 75%. Fine. Chalo ji. Now coming to the this topic. So remember, as I said, GDP and GVA, एक बेसिक जो सिमिलैरिटीज दोनों में इन दोनों कॉन्सेप्ट्स में है, GDP एंड GVA में, that both are the tools used for analyzing the country's economic performance or the performance of an economy. ठीक है, so both are the tools used for analyzing the economic performance of any country or nation. Economic performance. ठीक है, so these are basically the tools which measures the economic growth. ठीक है, though conceptually both are different, but the function is same. Now what does this mean, GDP and GVA? This is important. So firstly, GDP, as it suggests, the full form is gross domestic product. So it simply means, how we define GDP, it means that the final, or you can say the monetary measure of all the final goods and services. I am emphasizing the word final and not the intermediates. So the whatever worth of final goods and services have been produced in a country, in a domestic boundary or a domestic country within a particular period of time or within a year is referred to as the GDP of that particular country. ठीक है, so write down, इसको लिख लो, the GDP hyphen, write down, it is a monetary measure, it is a monetary measure of all final goods and services, put final in inverted commas, final, because intermediate भी goods and services होती हैं, उनको हम count नहीं करते, in order to avoid the problems of double counting. ठीक है, so only final. Final means जो हम as a consumer consume करते हैं, I mean final is basically the consumption goods. ठीक है, not कि एक पर्टिकुलर प्रोडक्ट को प्रोड्यूस करने में, फाइनल शेप देने में कितने उसमें इंटरमीडिएट प्रोडक्ट्स यूज हुए हैं. वी आर नॉट कंसर्न्ड विद दोज थिंग्स, रादर वी जस्ट टेक इनटू अकाउंट द वैल्यू ऑफ द फाइनल प्रोडक्ट विच कुड बी कंज्यूम्ड. ठीक है, विच वी एज सिटीजन्स गेट फ्रॉम द मार्केट. ठीक है, सो दोज आर फाइनल सेट्स ऑफ गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज. सो राइट डाउन, GDP is basically monetary measure of all the final goods and services produced in a country in a given period, ठीक है, in a given period. So GDP जो मेजर करते हैं हम और कैलकुलेट करते हैं, इसके 4 बेसिक एलिमेंट्स हैं और कंपोनेंट्स हैं. the 4 key, you can say, elements or the components of GDP. These 4 key elements are first private final consumption expenditure. I will explain one by one. Second is government final consumption expenditure. Third is investment expenditure. And last one is net exports. To which we show it with the help of NX. Net exports is basically exports minus imports, whether the figure is in negative or positive. ठीक है? So let's understand one by one. When we say private final consumption expenditure, as I said कि in GDP calculation we always take the final figures. ठीक है? So private final consumption expenditure, whatever expenditure, whatever amount we spend, on goods and services as a private individual, ठीक है, in an economy in a given year or in a particular period. ठीक है, So those sets of expenditures are referred to as the private final expenditures, that is expenditures incurred by private individuals. ठीक है, those are called private final expenditures. Then is government final consumption expenditures. Even governments have their expenditures for day to day, like making payments in the form of you can say salaries, government employees की जो salaries है. So again it's a kind of consumption, or you can say it's a kind of expenditure from the government side. Fine. So again we take into account the final consumption expenditure made by the government. ठीक है, like paying salaries to government employees. ठीक है. Next is investment expenditure. So this is very important component, that whatever investment have been made in an economy or generated in an economy in a particular period or particular year, this expenditure could be from both sides. Private businessman invest, as well as the investment could come from the government side as well. So comprises of both private investment plus government investment. So in totality we just take it as a investment expenditure, that is whatever spendings has been incurred or made in or used for the investment purposes, or for creating the fixed assets you can say, or for setting up industries. ठीक है. Like private and government, as I said. So private कैसे? Private like firms setting up new industries. In on the similar lines, government is constructing roads, bridges, So things could be like that. Next and the last one is net exports. So net exports में क्या है? Basically exports we show it with the help of X, minus imports we show it with the help of M. So कितना आपने एक पर्टिकुलर ईयर में, फाइनेंशियल ईयर यू कैन से, आपने एक्सपोर्ट किया इंडिया ने, एंड कितना हमने वर्थ इंपोर्ट किया, दोनों में डिफरेंस क्या है? सो नेट इंपोर्ट, अगर एक्सपोर्ट ज़्यादा किए होंगे हमने तो हमारी दिस वुड बी इन पॉजिटिव, और इंपोर्ट अगर हमें ज़्यादा किया, जो कि इन इंडियाज केस होता है, सो वी वुड बी हैविंग डेफिसिट्स इन द, दैट वुड बी हैविंग द नेगेटिव बैलेंस. ठीक है, बिकॉज आपने इंपोर्ट ज़्यादा किया, पेमेंट ज़्यादा की है, एंड एक्सपोर्ट्स एज अ अर्निंग, दैट इज रिसीट्स जो है वो आपकी कम हुई है. सो व्हेन योर रिसीट्स इज लेस देन योर दिस पेमेंट्स, देन यू वुड बी हैविंग द नेगेटिव बैलेंस. ठीक है. सो यू ऑलवेज टेक इनटू अकाउंट द नेट एक्सपोर्ट्स फिगर्स. ठीक है. बाय एडिंग ऑल दिस 4 components we get what we call it the GDP figure of a country in a particular financial year. ठीक है. Fine. So this is how we get or calculate the GDP figure. Clear है? ठीक है. Remember, one important point is that GDP always calculates the national income from demand side. Why demand side? Because we are saying that final consumption expenditure, who makes final consumption expenditure? When you take into account the private individuals, so we are spending, we are basically demanding some goods and services. So that's why the GDP is GDP calculates national income from the demand side, because like as a private individual you are demanding certain goods and services, as private individual, even government as a private party is making expenditures, private individuals are making investments, and then we have this net exports. So exporters could be the private individuals. ठीक है. So all these were related to the demand side. So easy to remember, in GDP we have D. So remember that the GDP shows the demand side of an economy. Demand side of an economy, or demand side or GDP calculates national income from demand side. ठीक है. चलो जी, that's about GDP. Next is GVA, gross value added. ग्रॉस टोटल वैल्यू एडिशन कितनी हुई है एक पर्टिकुलर ईयर में इन अ पर्टिकुलर इकोनॉमी, ठीक है। सो बेसिकली इट कैलकुलेट्स द सेम नेशनल इनकम फ्रॉम द सप्लाई साइड्स. व्हाई सो? Because it takes into account the total value added, it takes into account the value addition of from different sectors or from the production side, value addition from different sectors like primary, secondary and tertiary, from different sectors. So it basically gives the picture of sectoral value addition. So basically I mean primary, so primary like agriculture, fishing and forestry, so total production कितने agriculture की रही है, output कितनी रही है. From secondary like manufacturing, construction and all, उनकी contribution कितनी है. So this you can see that these are the supply sides, fine. Then services, ठीक है, again supply side. So that's why this it takes into account, you know, it takes or gives the final picture of the value addition from different sectors. So when you talk about the sectors, it means GVA takes into account the supply side of economy, supply side of economy, ठीक है, while GDP is being calculated from the demand side, fine. ठीक है. नाउ जीवीए को हम कैसे डिफाइन करते हैं? सो अकॉर्डिंग टू आरबीआई डिफाइन जीवीए एज हाउ? जीवीए एज द वैल्यू ऑफ आउटपुट, द वैल्यू ऑफ फाइनल आउटपुट, यू कैन से प्रोड्यूस्ड बाय द डिफरेंट सेक्टर्स, वैल्यू ऑफ फाइनल आउटपुट माइनस intermediate outputs, intermediate inputs, basically intermediate inputs, ठीक है. I mean जो भी intermediate inputs लगी उस particular एक product को value देने में, final value जो उसकी है और the final output जो है, ठीक है, उसको प्रोड्यूस करने में, सो हम उसको माइनस करते हैं, ठीक है. अगेन जैसे जीडीपी में भी हमने इंटरमीडिएट जो वो थी उसको हम कंसीडर नहीं करते नेशनल इनकम में, इन ऑर्डर टू अवॉइड द डबल काउंटिंग कि आपकी सेम चीज़ एक ही प्रोडक्ट की आप फाइनल दैट्स वाई जीडीपी में भी हम फाइनल कंजम्पशन एक्सपेंडिचर की बात करते हैं, नॉट द इंटरमीडिएट वंस. सो हम फाइनल जो है प्रोडक्ट उसकी हमेशा अकाउंट में लेते हैं उसको, ना कि इंटरमीडिएट वंस की, ठीक है. सो दैट्स वाई द फॉर्मूला इज वैल्यू ऑफ फाइनल आउटपुट of all the sectors minus the intermediate inputs, जो inputs like raw materials जो उन products को वैल्यू एडिशन करने में जो लगे हैं और फाइनल शेप देने में जो भी यूज़ हुए हैं इनपुट्स, ठीक है. सो जो भी इनपुट्स यूज़ हुई हैं उनको हम अकाउंट में नहीं लेते, दैट्स व्हाई वी आर सब्ट्रैक्टिंग और डिडक्टिंग देम फ्रॉम द फाइनल आउटपुट, ठीक है. फाइन. सो व्हाट डज दिस इंडिकेट? आई मीन जीवीए इंडिकेट क्या कर रहा है इतना कुछ डिस्कस करने के बाद? सो एज आई सेड द फोकस इज ऑन सेक्टर्स. So GVA you can say gives the final the picture of it talks about the real scenario of the sectors, that which sector is struggling, which sector has this has robust robust growth or robust output, ठीक है. So which sector of the economy is robust and which sector is struggling basically, ठीक है. So GVA gives this picture. Now the biggest question is how the both are related. Till now we have seen the differences, that how they are different from each other. Now conceptually different कैसे हैं? Now we are saying now we will be focusing on how both are related, how both, that is GDP and GVA are related to each other. GDP and GVA are related to each other, related to each other, ठीक है. How both are related to each other, ठीक है. So remember GDP की कैलकुलेट करने का जो फॉर्मूला है that is GVA प्लस टैक्सेस, जो गवर्नमेंट को टैक्स इनकम्स मिलते हैं, माइनस सब्सिडीज, वट एवर गवर्नमेंट स्पेंड्स ऑन द सब्सिडीज, दैट इज अ काइंड ऑफ एक्सपेंडिचर फॉर गवर्नमेंट सब्सिडीज, ठीक है, लाइक डिफरेंट वेलफेयर स्कीम्स चल रही हैं, उस पर गवर्नमेंट सब्सिडी देती है, बट जो टैक्सेस हैं दैट इज इनकम फॉर गवर्नमेंट, ठीक है. So whenever we calculate GDP, we take into account GVA plus taxes earned by the government minus subsidies incurred by the government. ठीक है. So this whole this operations or the calculations gives you the final picture of the GDP. ठीक है, the final figure of the GDP. ठीक है. फाइन. सो इससे एक और हम कंक्लूजन निकाल सकते हैं कि अगर ये GVA अगर टैक्सेस जो हैं वो ग्रेटर हैं सब्सिडीज से, तो देयर वुड बी ग्रोथ इन GDP, पॉजिटिव ग्रोथ. बट अगर एट द सेम टाइम सब्सिडीज ज़्यादा हैं टैक्सेस से, ठीक है, सो देयर वुड बी लोअर ग्रोथ, और द रेट ऑफ ग्रोथ वी सी द फॉल इन रेट ऑफ ग्रोथ ऑफ GDP. ठीक है, बिकॉज गवर्नमेंट इज पेइंग मोर देन अर्निंग. ठीक है. सो whenever you have a negative balance or whenever your earning is more less than your expenditure, so obviously you are having negative growth. ठीक है, और lesser growth or lower growth comparing on year basis. ठीक है. ठीक. सो रिमेंबर दैट्स वाई आई सेड कि जब भी ये हम देखते हैं तो GDP यहाँ पे आपका जो इस केस में है पर्टिकुलर, दिस शोज कि योर GDP इज सिंस इट इज ग्रोइंग और हैज ग्रोन, सो इस वजह से योर GDP वुड बी ग्रेटर देन योर GVA. नाउ आई एम गिविंग द आंसर्स टू द क्वेश्चन विच आई इनिशियली put this discuss that why GDP's figure is 6.3% while GVA figure is 5.6%. Why this divergence? So if this GDP is more than greater than GVA, it shows that government has earned good amount of taxes. The government is earning better tax amounts. ठीक है. So it is showing that basically that what government has paid or expends as subsidies are lesser than what government gets or earns as in the form of taxes. ठीक है. So this shows that your GDP is higher than your GVA. Fine. So this is a positive sign. This is again showing that our GDP to our tax to GDP ratio is also increasing. ठीक है, on year basis. That's why your GDP is higher than your GVA. Clear है?
Yes, sir.
Good. Chalo. So that ends our another topic. Let's move to the third topic, and that is, since the whole world is grappling with the climate change and we too have discussed climate change is one of the important topics for the exams. So the major problem, we are discussing the problems but we are not reaching to the solutions, and why we are unable to limit this 1.5 degree of increment in temperature before the this 2050 that we had promised or outlined in COP21 Paris Climate Agreement in 2015. So why we are not able to restrict or stop restrict this figure or the margin of 1.5 degree to 2 degrees Celsius, and why the earth is warming day by day on the so one of the major reasons that for any planning is one thing, but for implementing the same we need funds. Fine. So the major issue with all this is mobilization of funds. Mobilization of funds for mobilization of funds. ठीक है. Fine. Rather I need to put here green funds so that it will directly reflect that we are concerned only with the climate change. ठीक है. So mobilization of green funds. ठीक है. So you are aware of this fact that recently we concluded the world concluded this COP27 fine conference of parties, 26th round of conference of parties in Sharm el Sheikh, that is in Egypt. ठीक है, recently. So there as always they again discuss this topic, you know, the most important topics of funds, I mean how to mobilize the funds for that thing. So discussion is always on the positive notes that yes, we need to scale up the investment, we need to scale up the funds in order to mitigate the global warming or the warming. ठीक है? So remember, one of the issues is why our focus is on funds. Basically, the amount of funds which are flowing in, you know, from developed to developing country, you can say, or in the, you know, at international level, that is only around 1% to 10% of what actually required to mitigate this crisis of, you know, climate change or global warming. ठीक है? So give the heading, what is the climate finance? What is climate finance? What is climate finance? What is climate finance? Write down. It refers to local, national and international and international. It refers to local, national and international financing drawn from or mobilized from private, public and other sources of financing that seeks to support mitigation and adaptation that will address the climate change, that is needed to address the climate change. Remember, this whole, you know, COP meetings take place under the umbrella of an international organization. We called it UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. ठीक है? UNFCCC. So UNFCCC की जो conventions हैं, firstly 1997 क्योटो प्रोटोकॉल, क्योटो जापान में है, क्योटो प्रोटोकॉल talked about mobilizing, you know, funds for this mitigation and adaptation purposes. Then further, even COP21 in the form of Paris Climate Agreement 2015 again talked about this, or stressed upon the need to mobilize funds for mitigating the climate crisis or the climate change and for the adaptation purposes as well. ठीक है? Under this, a promise was made by, because historically, you know, those countries which are developed today, you know, are more responsible for today's global warming or the climate change, because they have polluted more, you know, the environment than the developing countries. Fine. So under this PCA, or to which we refer to as a COP21 Conference of Parties, the 21st round of Conference of Parties, fine. PCA, Paris Climate Agreement, took place in 2015, November, December, hopefully December. So 2015, fine. So there, this particular conference called for financial assistance from developed countries to the more vulnerable, you can say developing countries, developing countries, ठीक है. Fine. So this mechanism was established under PCA to assist the developing countries or the more vulnerable countries. Fine. And who is going to assist? Those who are responsible for this situation. Fine. Or those who have historically polluted the environment. ठीक है. इसके लिए एक प्रिंसिपल बनाया गया. दिस होल मैकेनिज्म वाज कुछ लीगल प्रोविजंस होने चाहिए. सो उसके लिए एक प्रोविजन बनाया गया इस पर्टिकुलर ट्रांजैक्शन के लिए, एंड वी कॉल्ड इट CBDR, दैट इज कॉमन बट डिफरेंशिएटेड रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटीज. CBDR कॉमन तो है बिकॉज पोल्यूशन सबके लिए कॉमन है, वार्मिंग, क्लाइमेट चेंज इज कॉमन इशू, but differentiated responsibilities, because you cannot ask two countries, a developed and developing countries to contribute in the same manner, or even the two developed countries, because it might be कि US is more polluting or historically was a bigger emitter or polluter than France or Britain or Canada. Fine. So we cannot have a common responsibility. You cannot ask all the countries to pay uniform $100 billion, something like that. Fine. So common तो है but differentiated responsibilities है. जिस proportion में एक particular country ने pollute किया है और emit किया है pollution, उसी proportion में उसको contribute भी करना चाहिए. Fine. So this seems to be a reasonable principle. Fine. बट लेटर ऑन क्या हुआ, इसमें एक और चीज ऐड की गई, एंड दैट वाज डिमांड फ्रॉम डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज. एंड व्हाट वाज दैट एडिशन? RC, दैट इज रिस्पेक्टिव कैपेबिलिटीज. कि जो भी कंट्री कंट्रीब्यूट करेगी, और कंट्रीब्यूट करने के लिए कहा जा रहा है इस पर्टिकुलर टू डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज, दे वुड कंट्रीब्यूट एज पर देयर रिस्पेक्टिव कैपेबिलिटीज. जितनी कैपेबिलिटी है उतनी प्रोपोर्शन में वो कंट्रीब्यूट करेंगे. ठीक है. सो टुडे वी कॉल इट CBDR RC, दैट इज रिस्ट्रिक्टेड और रिस्पेक्टिव कैपेबिलिटीज. ठीक है. बिकॉज डिफरेंट कंट्रीज हैव डिफरेंट कैपेबिलिटीज, बिकॉज दे आर एट द डिफरेंट लेवल्स ऑफ देयर developmental process. So all of them cannot be asked to pay the same amount, or contribute the same amount. So that's why we have provision of respective capability. जिसकी जितनी capability है उतना ही pay करेगा. ठीक. Remember this principle of CBDR जो है, that is not any new concept, but this was rather established as a mechanism in 1992 Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. 1992 Earth Summit. ठीक है. Earth Summit. ठीक है. Now give the heading under this only subhead, that how much fund actually we need for mitigating climate change, or how much fund we need for climate action. How much fund we need for climate action. So one estimate says that globally how much fund we need, how much fund we need for climate action. So an estimate says that somewhere for the global transition to low carbon economy, because our focus is on carbon mitigation, so on the transition to low carbon economy would take somewhere around or require around USD 4 to 6 trillion 4 to 6 trillion, and this would require, remember, every year. I mean हमारी इकोनॉमी भी इंडिया की इतनी नहीं है अभी 4 ट्रिलियन की, 4 to 6 trillion every year till 2050 if we want to avert the risk of climate action or the climate change. Fine. So हर साल हमें 4 से 6 ट्रिलियन डॉलर्स चाहिए इंटरनेशनली in order to mitigate the risk of climate change or climate risks. ठीक है, one estimation. Second is out of ये तो है ही separate है. Further we need somewhere around 4 trillion dollars for what? For renewable energy transition. हम कह रहे हैं ना, we need clean energy, clean technology for renewable energy and all. So for transition from fossil fuels or fossil based energy to renewable energy like wind, solar and all, we need somewhere around how much? 4 trillion dollars every year till 2030 in order to reach the targets of net zero. Even कि इंडिया ने भी प्रॉमिस किया है to the target of net zero by 2070. Fine. So different countries have promised different time scale. ठीक है. So अगर हम net zero emission targets को achieve करना है, so we would be would be needed how much? Around 4 trillion dollars to invest in renewable energy or the clean energy every year till 2030. Then only we will be able to what? To transition to clean energy and thereby somewhere will be able to achieve the targets of net zero. Fine. So another important point. Remember, another important fact is जो aggregate requirement है सिर्फ और सिर्फ developing country की in order to implement the climate actions or projects, और climate actions related जो भी plans and projects हैं उसको implement करने के लिए between 2022 and 2030 इन 8-9 years में हमें जितनी भी requirements हैं, ठीक है, सिर्फ और सिर्फ डेवलपिंग कंट्री की मैं बात कर रहा हूँ, in order to mitigate this risk of climate change or to implement their climate actions or the climate plans, they need somewhere around how much? $6 trillion every year. $6 trillion. I will let you know the exact flow or exact money flowing to the developing countries on yearly basis. So we will be able to see the gap that how much we need and how much actually the countries are getting. They are not getting even 1 trillion, they are getting in billions and not even 100 billion. So you can understand that how mammoth this task is for the worldwide community in order to mitigate the climate risks. Fine. We are talking in terms of trillions, but we are not able to even get the billions. ठीक है? So it is one of the major issue that is related to climate finance or the mobilization of climate funds. ठीक है. एंड जितना हम लेट करेंगे इस प्रोसेस को, जितनी कंट्रीज ग्लोबली हम इस चीज़ को डिले करेंगे उतनी कॉस्ट बढ़ती जाएगी. हाउ? सो वन अगेन फैक्ट इज जस्ट फ्यू इयर्स बैक we needed around 1 to 1.5% of global GDP. 1 to 1.5% of global GDP. Global GDP I am talking about, not India's GDP. 1 to 1.5% of global GDP for mitigating the climate risks, global GDP. But today we need somewhere around 5% of global GDP. 5% of global GDP. if we say that global GDP, this 5% is equivalent to, let's assume, $6 trillion. So somewhere we need how much? 6 by 5 into 100 means, I mean, how much would be the global GDP today? So 6 by 5 into 100, 520, fine, 20 into 500, so 26, 20 into 6. So somewhere the world GDP is $120 trillion. We can say on the basis of these figures that of 120 we need how much? 5%, that is $6 trillion. So you can understand that how bigger this task is. Even the India's economy today is near about half, just 3 point something, not even $3.5 trillion. But to say we are somewhere about $3.5 trillion. So you can say just little bit more than half of this amount, $6 trillion. So this is again a biggest challenge the world is facing today, and that's related to the mobilization of climate funds or the green funds. Fine. Yes, I was talking about that. This is the requirement, that is estimation related to the how much funds we need in order to mitigate the climate risk. But what exactly, the amount that is flowing towards the vulnerable, or you can say the developing countries today. So initially in Paris Climate Agreement, the developed countries promised to deliver how much? Annually or every year around $100 billion to the developing countries. But if you check the the latest data, then somewhere the developing countries are getting only 50 to 80 in this range of billion dollars, not even $100 billion. And we are talking about that we need somewhere $6 trillion, fine, every year. But at present the worldwide, the global this financial flow or the funds flow is not even how much? 100 billions, not even 1 trillion, and we are talking about how much? $6 trillion that we need. So you can see the gap between these two, the actual we need and the the requirement and the actual we are getting. ठीक है? So इस gap को कम करने की ज़रूरत है. The sooner we do it, the better it will be for the world community, the whole world. ठीक है? So what are the challenges to this mobilization of climate funds? Challenges क्या है? Just write down shortly and briefly. Give the heading the challenges, because इतना हम discuss कर चुके हैं, तो you could have this idea कि challenges क्या हैं. I mean, it's not easy to get the money from anybody, either it's private individual or a country. ठीक है? So challenges क्या हैं? The thing is कि अगर developed countries financial flows अगर $100 billion भी देना start कर दें every year, still it would be just a tip of iceberg. How? Because you can say that this is not even, I mean, the 100 billions is nothing. $100 billion where we need 6 trillions, 5 to 6 trillions every year, So this is not even 1 trillion, and how come we expect of getting $6 trillion every year? Fine. So I mean ये सिर्फ अकेले डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज नहीं कर सकती. इसमें जो कंट्रीब्यूशन है वो किसकी चाहिए? एटलीस्ट वी नीड significant contribution or jump from whom? The industry side or the business community. So businesses and corporations, they can invest in the green projects. ठीक है? बट अभी तक अगर देखा जाए लेटेस्ट जो ट्रेंड देखा, I mean जो प्रेजेंट सिनेरियो है, that is private in this sector is lagging far behind, out of just contributing somewhere around 30% at at present. So 30% of the green, you can say, funds or the funding contribution is coming from the private sector. Fine. 70% from this public, from the public sector. ठीक है? Another is climate finance जो है, it flows from number of channels like bilateral, one country to another. It could be, you know, regional, like regional groupings, like BRICS, like Southeast Asian, ASEAN, like regional blocks or regional groupings. Then we could have multilateral institutions as well, like World Bank, IMF, and even ki ADB, or any kind of multilateral institutions. Fine. The problem with this is that एग्जैक्ट कितनी चाहिए क्वांटम हमें, दिस इज द इशू, यू नो, बायलैटरल, रीजनल एंड ऑल. सो एग्जैक्ट quantum of money that we need, we are not able to, you know, ascertain that particular quantum. ठीक है. So different assessments हैं countries की at the bilateral level, multilateral level and regional level. ठीक है. So again एक ये gap है जिसको फिल करने की ज़रूरत है. So future में हम क्या, I mean what could be the, we have discussed about the challenges, then what could be the solutions. So major solution that we look after, number one is, give the heading, subhead again, can tax or what types of tax be a source for climate fund. So remember, as it happens always, the bulk of जो funding है that is going to come up from the common citizens like us, because ultimately the source for financing anything are the taxes. ठीक है. So it would be coming out of the pockets of common citizens in the form of what, like the fossil fuel tax, like जो petrol, diesel use कर रहे हैं, other fossil fuels, this can be taxed in future. Then प्रोडक्शन ऑफ कोल जो कि इंडिया में ऑलरेडी टैक्स उस पे है, एंड उस फंड्स को जो भी टैक्स इन अर्निंग्स होती हैं, यू नो, फ्रॉम द कोल सेक्टर, देन गवर्नमेंट स्पेंड्स देम फॉर, यू नो, क्लीनर और जनरेटिंग वैल्यूएबल रिसोर्सेज, लाइक इन्वेस्टिंग इन क्लीन टेक्नोलॉजीज. सो दिस कैन बी वन ऑफ द वे फॉरवर्ड्स. ठीक है. देन you might be aware of कि many countries in the European countries like Germany and all talking about the carbon tax. ठीक है. So carbon tax भी impose किया जा सकता है, like if you are like India is exporting something to Germany, so Germany can import carbon tax on that particular product, that how much carbon had been used or emitted in the production of this much amount of particular product. Fine. So again it could be one of the sources, that is a carbon tax. बिजनेसेस पे इसको इम्पोज किया जा सकता है. फाइन. सो अल्टीमेटली अगर हम इन सब का क्रक्स देखें तो दिस ऑल काइंड ऑफ टैक्सेस वुड बी फिल्टर्ड डाउन और वुड बी इम्पोज्ड अल्टीमेटली अपॉन होम, द कॉमन सिटीजन्स. बिकॉज बिजनेसेस पे भी अगर आप लगाते हो, इंडस्ट्रीज पे, लाइक कोई चीज़ इंटरमीडिएट, यू नो, इनपुट्स महंगी हो रही हैं, तो अल्टीमेटली जो फाइनल गुड्स बन के आ रही है वो भी महंगी होगी, राइट. सो those prices would be reflected in the final goods which would be consumed by the consumers. So as a consumer you would be paying more in the form of taxes. ठीक है. And those taxes could be a source of for mobilization of green climate or green funds. Fine. ठीक है. सो इम्पॉर्टेंट एक यहाँ पे चीज़ आती है कि क्या इंडिया ने कोई इनिशिएटिव लिया है फॉर क्लाइमेट फाइनेंस. सो येस इंडीड वी हैव टेकन सर्टेन स्टेप्स. फर्स्टली वी हैव अ फंड कॉल्ड नेशनल अडेप्टेशन फंड, NAF, नेशनल अडेप्टेशन फंड. ठीक है. दिस वाज लॉन्च्ड इन द ईयर 2014. ठीक है. इसको मैंडेट किया गया कि इसकी जो कॉर्पस होगी, जो अमाउंट होगा, दिस फंड वुड बी वर्थ 100 करोड़ रुपीज, 100 करोड़. ठीक है. सो द एम वाज, एज वी हैव डिस्कस्ड, टू ब्रिज द गैप बिटवीन द फंड्स वी एक्चुअली नीड. ठीक है. फॉर मिटिगेटिंग द क्लाइमेट रिस्क और मीटिंग द क्लाइमेट चेंज एंड दिस challenges. that how much we need and how much we have available or how much funds are at our disposal. So उस bridge को कम करने के लिए, and as we are this whole things is related to climate, so obviously this fund would be implemented or undertaken by which? So Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, MOEFCCC, MOEFCC, that is Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. ठीक है. Next is we have another fund and we call it NAFCC, National Adaptation Fund. ये इतना ही है, National Adaptation Fund for Climate Change. इसी NF को CC ऐड कर दिया गया, so it became NAFCC, National Adaptation Fund for Climate Change, and it was established in the year 2015 to meet the cost of adaptation to climate change. To meet the cost of adaptation to climate change. Then another fund that we have is National Clean Energy Fund. Another fund that we have is National Clean Energy Fund, NCEF, National Clean Energy Fund. This was established through carbon tax on the use of coal. As I said earlier कि इंडिया में कोल प्रोडक्शन जो है उस पर ऑलरेडी इट इज़ अ टैक्स्ड, कोल इज बीइंग टैक्स्ड. सो जो भी कोल को टैक्स करके अमाउंट आती है दैट इज डिपॉजिटेड इन दिस फंड इन ऑर्डर टू हैव for what purposes, to shift from or to have transition from fossil fuels to clean energy, from fossil based energy to clean energy. ठीक है. And this fund is headed by finance secretary, so he is the chairman. This fund lies at his disposal. ठीक है. So this fund is looked after by the finance secretary of government of India or of India. ठीक है. Purpose क्या है इसका? तो basically this fund is meant for funding the research and development projects, ठीक है, in the field of innovative clean energy technology. Clean energy technology. ठीक है, as the name suggests, clean energy. So basically it funds clean energy techs or technology. ठीक है. So these are three types of funds that currently we have. ठीक है. फाइन, क्लियर है यहाँ तक? और करें या यहीं पे स्टॉप करें? हाँ जी, इतना ही. चलो फिर we have 2-3 topics left, so we'll be carrying forward in the next class. So that's it from my side. If you have any query, anything, anywhere not clear, let me know. Otherwise, we can call off the day. Yes. Anything? कोई doubt कहीं?
No doubt.
Okay, thank you then.